The story begins by showing the main character in this series, named Yusuke Urameshi, who look confused, because that he has died in an accident. A little flashback to 4 hours earlier, where Yusuke is a teenager who is rude, temperamental, a student who fights, often skips school. Basically all the negative things about education, already he did it. Even so, Yusuke actually has empathy that exceeds other friends in his age. Yusuke also doesn't like when he sees bullying happening in front of him, but that sometimes became a problem for himself, because often people judged that he was the bully. Plus, his attitude doesn't care what people say, so when he is accused of being the perpetrator, he doesn't try to defend himself at all. Yusuke is also shown to have a good friend named Kazuma Kuwabara, with his trademark blonde-dyed hair, and because of his familiarity, Kuwabara actually claims that Yusuke as his eternal rival, and always tries to prove who is the strongest between them. Although Kuwabara never won against Yusuke. Apart from Kuwabara, Yusuke is also close with a girl at school named Kiko Yukimura. She is the only person who believes that Yusuke is actually a good person. That day, when Yusuke finished eating at the shop where Kiko worked, there was an accident caused by a demonic creature called the yokai bug. The creature formed a large fly, then possessed the body of a truck driver, which made him lose control. Yusuke, who happened to be at the scene of the accident, then saw the truck heading right towards a boy, and without thinking, he immediately saved him. But unfortunately, it actually had to make him sacrifice his own life. After being confirmed dead and becoming a vengeful spirit, Yusuke was then visited by a Shinigami, or you could say an angel of death, named Botan, to guide Yusuke to the afterlife. Botan said that Yusuke could not enter heaven or hell, and to get further explanation, she would take him to meet her boss, Enma-sama, or another named Konma, the ruler of the afterlife. Long story short, with his attitude that still seems indifferent, Yusuke finally joins Botan in the Burning Realm. There he then met the king Enma, the ruler of the place, who determines whether someone will go to heaven or hell. Yusuke's death for saving a child is an anomaly, which may only happen once every 1,000 years, and for that, Enma intends to bring him back to life. But instead, Yusuke was asked to serve the afterlife by becoming an astral detective. Later, Yusuke will be tasked with solving cases involving yokai in the human world, and since the position had been no worker for a long time, Enma then offered it to Yusuke. Even though he has been provoked back to life and will be rewarded, Yusuke doesn't care at all. And Yusuke prefers to become a vengeful spirit, just because he doesn't like being ordered by someone. This made Enma, the king of the underworld, quite surprised. After rejecting Enma's offer, just like that, Yusuke then returned to the human world in his form, which is now a spirit, and Yusuke can only watch those closest to him from afar. At this moment, Yusuke then realized that there were people who cared about him and were sad when he died, even though during his life he often made trouble. Until finally Yusuke decided to accept Enma's previous offer. But at the same time, a large hole begins to seep, making small yokai bugs appear around Yusuke's residence and possessing his schoolmates who are being bullied. The way yokai bugs work is that they will possess someone with negative thoughts and make them strong. However, it will also make out of control and chaos. Meanwhile, Yusuke's mother, who was still beside his body, then felt an oddity, where Yusuke's body was come back warm again and his heart began to beat up. Unfortunately, because the fire had spread to rest of the house, his mother did not have time to confirm this because she was immediately pulled out by her neighbor. Kiko, who had just arrived and heard Yusuke's mother's words, without thinking, immediately broke in to save Yusuke's body, even though in the end it endangered herself. But it was at that moment that actually awakened Yusuke's power that he didn't realize. When he saw Kiko in danger, without thinking, Yusuke agreed to all the conditions to become an afterlife agent. In this story, that's roughly how apparent death works. At this point, the first task Yusuke has to completely is stop the yokai bug that has possessed the body of his schoolmate, who is beating the hell out of Kuwabara and his gang. At first, Yusuke, who still did not know the benefits of being an afterlife agent, only used his common physical strength to fight with other students. But after being in humans' bodies for a long time, the yokai bugs began to take over and change their host's form. So that makes Yusuke even more cornered. It actually forced him to use his spiritual energy for the first time. That way, Yusuke finally could complete his experimental task as an afterlife agent. Yusuke could exterminate the yokai bug while saving his schoolmates. On the other hand, Kuwabara, who had just woken up at the crime scene, was then astonished when he saw Yusuke, who returned to life. He stunned and could say nothing. After completing it all, Yusuke, who has returned to being a full human being. Yusuke was also finally able to reunite with Kiko and his mother in the human world. In the afterlife, Enma, who had witnessed Yusuke's actions from the beginning, seemed worried about his choice. It because Enma was afraid that Yusuke would not be able to complete the real task, because the opponents he would face were definitely much heavier and stronger than this. Enma also planned to order Yusuke to retrieve the 3 afterlife relics or treasure that were stolen by 3 yokai. The 3 relics include the Soul Eater Ball, the Mirror of Darkness, and the Magical Sword, each of which has a different power. The problem was that the 3 yokais who now held the treasures seemed to be at very different level from Yusuke now, so Enma is not sure that Yusuke can complete the task. After being resurrected from the dead, it means that Yusuke must now work to help Enma become an astral detective in the human world. His first task is to recover the 3 afterlife treasure that were previously stolen by 3 yokai. But before that, Yusuke must first learn what is called spiritual energy, which will be his main weapon against the yokai in the demon world. Because Yusuke had previously successfully awakened his spiritual energy when fighting the yokai bug that infected his schoolmates, Enma then asked him to develop the use of this energy to become more effective. The way to train was by concentrating the energy at one point on his fingertips. The technique is called the spirit gun. If Yusuke could master it, then he would be able to fire his spiritual energy for long-range attacks. Unfortunately, before Yusuke really understood the theory of using the technique, something appeared on Enma's vision screen, which showed a chaos in the human world, which was caused by none other than a yokai named Goki, one of the 3 yokai who took the treasures, the Soul Eater Ball. It is explained that of the 3 treasure of the afterlife, Goki is the most dangerous. That's because he doesn't hesitate to eat human souls. Plus, with the glowing orb now in his hand, it has the ability to take and store as many human souls as possible. Therefore, Yusuke must quickly investigate and stop Goki before more victims fall down. Long story short, after returning to the human world and seeing Goki's victims who were all children, Yusuke did not want to waste any more time and rushed off to find Goki's location. However, he ran into Kuwabara, who surprisingly could also see Botan. However, because it was a hassle and hectic, Botan immediately pulled Yusuke and they hurried away from there. After traveling to several places and gathering information from several people, Yusuke finally could find out the location of Goki, who want to launch an action at a playground. Without thinking, Yusuke immediately chased him to a junkyard. At first, Goki was worried, feeling that someone was following him. But knowing that Yusuke was just an ordinary human, he changed to his yokai form, which gave him extraordinary physical strength. However, in the midst of his battle, a boy he had previously saved arrived, who was absorbed by Goki. At this point, Yusuke, who was provoked, finally could use a spirit gun technique that hit Goki in the face and knocked him out in one strike. At that moment, the souls trapped inside the Soul Eater Ball were finally freed, and the boys then wake his consciousness up. During his battle with Goki, there was another yokai watching. He was Kurama, the yokai who took another treasure, the Mirror of Darkness, but even so, he did not interfere in the fight at all, and even chose to leave after Yusuke defeated Goki. The next day, after Yusuke could secure the Soul Eater Ball, Botan returned to see him and explained about the next target, that is the Mirror of Darkness held by Kurama. Botan said that the mirror had a very special power, which was able to grant and accept all requests of the holder, without exception. Even the most cruel requests, such as wars, natural disasters, and so on. Therefore, it would be very dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. Botan also added that the mirror would show its power during the full moon, which would happen in a few days. That meant Yusuke had to grab the treasures immediately before Kurama used it. After hearing this explanation, Yusuke then started his search by going back around the city. There he actually crossed paths with Kurama by accident, or it could be that Kurama approached Yusuke to bait him. Yusuke, who did not want to waste the opportunity, quietly followed him until he finally arrived at the hospital. Then Yusuke was surprised because it was shown that Kurama actually went there to visit his sick mother. Not only that, Kurama also calmly said that he would return the Mirror of Darkness after his goal was achieved, that is, to cure his mother. So it is told that Kurama is a yokai, or half-demon human from the previous generation. He was dying while fighting a yokai hunter like Yusuke, which eventually forced him to transfer his soul core into a human fetus, and Kurama stayed there until he was born again. Kurama originally intended to leave after he get back his strength, but with the love of a mother that he got during that time, Kurama then came to his senses and intended to repay the service by taking care of the person who had considered him as her own son. In the point, he trusted Yusuke and asked him to be patient. That's because after Kurama used the mirror to heal the mother, he promised to return it immediately without making any mess. But as soon as night fell, Botan returned to Yusuke to tell him something she had heard from Enma, that the condition for using the mirror is to give up the user's own life. Yusuke, who had previously died and saw how his mother and the loved ones grieved after his passing, rushed back to the hospital to prevent Kurama. That was because he knew that if Kurama were to sacrifice his own life, then everything would be useless because his mother would only feel sad for the rest of her life. Kuwabara, who also heard what Yusuke was going to do, then tried to stop him. It was because Kuwabara still had a personal grudge against the yokai after the incident a few nights earlier. However, Yusuke did not care at all and was still determined to catch up with Kurama, who had entered the mirror dimension of darkness. In that dimension, Yusuke then did a very unexpected thing. He also offered half his life in exchange for Kurama's life, so that Kurama could stay alive. On the other hand, the third yokai, named Hii, was shown taking the last treasure, the magical sword. It is said that the sword is able to provide additional strength for its users, and Hii was shown using the sword to open the third eyes, called Jagan Eyes. The thing he did was none other than to find the location of his sister, Yukina, who is now being kidnapped by a mafia boss to take her tears, because Yukina's tears will turn into a very valuable diamond. On the other hand, after successfully securing 2 afterlife treasure, it means that now Yusuke must face Hii to snatch the last treasure from him. Yusuke then rushes to catch up with Hii after getting information on the location of Hii, who was visiting the residence of the person who kidnapped Yukina. Here is shown the speed of Hii, who can even dodge Yusuke's energy bullets, where he should be able to easily finish Yusuke. But just like Kurama, Hii had absolutely no intention of hurting Yusuke. Although he knew Yusuke's arrival was to take back the magical sword from his hand, he did so because his purpose was clear, which was only to save his younger sister from human hands. Therefore, Hii then asked Yusuke not to disturb his purpose. Unfortunately, before they got there, the fat man who was holding Yukina had already taken her away to someone named Sakio, his business partner, as well as the person who gave Yukina to him. So it told that the two of them had previously traded, where Sakio asked for a piece of land belonging to the fat man, and in exchange he handed over Yukina, a yokai figure capable of producing the valuable diamond tears, who's very fantastic on the black market. Sakio did this not without reason, because he was also eyeing something that appeared on the fat man's territory, that is a large afterlife hole that continues to grow deeper, and is believed to be able to penetrate to the demon world. Here Sakio also asks the fat man not to worry about the people who are targeting him. That's because Sakio has 4 yokai men ready to protect them, and one of them is the Toguru, a top-class yokai who can manipulate his physical strength. The scene then changed, where it was shown after Yusuke had previously failed to stop Hii. Botan felt that Yusuke's strength was still not strong enough. Botan returned to Yusuke to inform him that Enma had prepared a mentor named Master Genkai, who would help him mastering spiritual energy. While they were talking about this, it turned out that Kuwabara, who had been stalking Yusuke since the fire incident, appeared and said that he also wanted to train with him. This is so that Kuwabara can both become strong and help Yusuke fight the yokai. Without wasting much time, the three of them immediately left for Master Genkai's places, which was in a secluded place on a hill. In that place, Master Genkai then tested Yusuke's abilities, which were indeed nothing and very basic. But because of his persistence, Yusuke finally, with an unexpected attack, forced Master Genkai to use her spiritual power. At this point, Yusuke felt that he already had the basics, that he was trained very hard to control his spiritual energy, by concentrating it and condensing it in a point. Meanwhile, Kuwabara was asked to train physically by hitting a large rock all day long. Long story short, after a few weeks of training, Kuwabara, who was highly motivated to become strong in order to protect his friends, was surprisingly able to awaken his spiritual energy through the medium of the wooden sword he wielded. He could split the boulder stone in two. Meanwhile, Yusuke also showed improvement where he finally could control his spiritual energy steadily, and now he was able to fully fire the spirit gun very efficiently. After decided that Yusuke was ready and able to take responsibility for his power, Master Genkai then passed on the spiritual orb to him, which was also the accumulation of Master Genkai's power so far, where according to Master Genkai, the spiritual orb holds secrets about the power of spiritual waves and at the same time marks the end of their training period. On the other hand, the Toguro who saw a large wave of energy coming from Master Genkai's places seemed to show a slightly different face. He then went up to Master Genkai, and still unknown what the connection was, but he looked like he had a long relationship with her. Meanwhile, it was shown that Kurama then went to see Hiei to ask for a magical sword, because Hiei had gotten the power he needed. That is his Jagan eyes. Kurama did this none other than to repay his debt to Yusuke, who had previously helped him and his mother. Kurama said that Yusuke was a trustworthy human being, but he, who as usual was phlegmatic, then rejected Kurama's request and instead advised him not to be friends with humans anymore. Then it switched back to showing Yusuke, who had returned from his training and stopped by the shop where Kiko worked. At first everything seems normal, until Kiko is suddenly kidnapped by Hiei, who secretly appears in the place. Without thinking twice, Yusuke rushed after Hiei, until finally arriving at an empty building where Hiei was hiding. And as soon as he saw Hiei, Yusuke immediately attacked him blindly and full of ambition to finish him off. But not long after the fisticuffs happened, Kurama appeared to separate two of them. He then explained what really happened, that it was not Hiei who had kidnapped Kiko, but Sakyo's yokai who had kidnapped her in the guise of Hiei, to pit them against each other. After hearing that, although here they still did not know the motivation of Sakyo's group to kidnap Kiko, but they finally agreed to work together. That's because Yukina is also likely to be in the same place as Kiko. And not long after, Kuwabara, who was previously informed by Boten, also appeared there and joined them. Without wasting time, the four of them rushed to rescue Kiko and Yukina, who are currently at Sakyo's headquarters. It turns out that the reason Sakyo stole Kiko and Yukina was to bait Yusuke and the others to come there, to be pitted as a betting or entertainment event for the crazy rich, as well as to fund the link between the demon world and the human world. As a bookie who was crazy about gambling, it was a stress reliever for Sakyo, who had always loved gambling. He even risked his life to gamble. Arriving at the place, he, who was antisocial and did not like to socialize, then decided to look for Yukina alone through the back route. In the middle of his journey, he was suddenly confronted by a large, tall yokai monster who carried an axe as his main weapon. In the fight, Hiei could dodge to bind time with the aim of making his opponent exhausted. And when the monster was caught off guard, that's when he immediately counterattacked. Feeling that Hiei is not an easy opponent to defeat, it turns out that the armor that his enemy has been wearing is not solely to protect his body, but he uses very heavy armor as training for himself. And when he took off the armor, Hiei was immediately overwhelmed by it. Not giving up just like that, Hiei, who originally came there to save his sister, finally got back up. It turned out that all this time, he had also been hiding his true strength as a class, a yokai, the top class in the yokai version, and he immediately issued his ulti, that is Black Dragon Fire, which made his enemy burn heavily. Meanwhile, Yusuke, who was previously looking for Kiko's location with Kurama and Kuwabara, was suddenly attacked by Saikyo's men. This yokai has explosive abilities, where here Kurama decides to deal with it. Meanwhile, Yusuke and Kuwabara rush to save Kiko. Although Kurama had launched an attack by sticking a rose into the yokai's hand, it did not change anything. His enemy had prepared the entire place with his explosive abilities, which overwhelmed Kurama. Under these conditions, Kurama finally showed his true face, who was also a class, a yokai. He immediately took control of the fight with great ease. He ensnared his enemy using his poisonous plant. But what he didn't realize, he had been in human form for too long, so his energy was immediately drained when he returned to yokai form. Then the enemy, who felt he had the upper hand and thought he had won, it turned out that from the beginning Kurama had inserted parasitic plant seeds into his enemy's body through roses at the beginning of the battle. And all this time Kurama was just stalling for time, so that the parasitic plants inside his enemy's body began to grow and tear his organs from the inside. After the fight ended, Kurama and Hai met in an injured condition. They rushed inside to help save the others. Unbeknownst to them, their fight had just been monitored by the crazy rich who had placed bets on Saikyo's yokai winning. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Kiko is shown in prison and accidentally meets Yukina, Hi's sister, who is imprisoned beside her. Here it is discovered that Yukina is also a yokai, but a good one. Regardless, Keiko begins to devise an escape plan by pretending to be in pain, then taking out the prison guards who were provoked by her judo skills. Then Kiko takes Yukina out of the place, where they meet Kuwabara. Unfortunately, they are stopped by Saikyo's yokai, who killed the man who tried to save Yukina earlier. Although physically the yokai looks like a person who is not eaten and so weak, but the yokai has great strength, which can manipulate his limbs into objects. Meanwhile, on the other hand, it was shown that Yusuke, who finally entered alone to look for Kiko's location, entered the arena, where Saikyo and the gamblers are watching him from above. It was then that Toguro appeared to challenge Yusuke. And before the fight, as a high-class bookie, Saikyo also tripled the prize bet, which made everyone go all in to place bets on Toguro as the winner. Despite only using 30% of his strength, Yusuke was already a victim of Toguro and was not given a chance to counterattack. Fortunately, he could avoid the Toguro's attack by using his skill to escape while skipping school before. Here Toguro just seemed to be playing with him, until finally Hai and Kurama appeared to help him. Back to Kuwabara, who is still having trouble fighting the yokai due to the significant difference in strength, where when the yokai's attention is diverted to Kiko, who is trying to help Kuwabara, that's when Kuwabara's trauma or fear of the fire incident the other day that injured his friends finally makes him rise again and pull out his spirit sword to split the yokai. But again, it didn't have much effect because the yokai's body was able to back united again. Realizing that he no longer had the strength to fight the yokai, he finally invited Kiko and Yukina to escape from there. At the same time, thousands of yokai bug were shown that began to come out of the device in a large hole and spread so quickly. This was known by Enma from the vision screen, who immediately issued a barrier Kikai to close the hole. Not stopping there, he also went to Saikyo, who did that to link the demon world and the human world. Arriving at the place, Saikyo welcomed Enma casually, and as a big Wookiee, the event certainly did not escape of the bet and gambling. Even this time, Saikyo bet using his life. He is willing to stop the yokai bugs if Yusuke and his friends manage to win against the Toguro. Conversely, if the Toguro wins, then Enma must destroy the barrier. Back to Yusuke, he fights 3 people at once and gets hit from multiple directions with terrifying reflexes and speed. Here it is shown that Toguro is still able to survive, and even the attacks launched by Yusuke and his friends seemed like no problem for him. Until at one point Yusuke could corner the Toguro and again concentrated his spiritual energy to release his spirit gun, which hit the Toguro hard. But even though he had used all his strength, it turned out that his attack did not make the slightest impression on Toguro's body. In fact, all of his wounds healed instantly. At the same time, Sakio, who saw Kuwabara along with Kiko and Yukina, who were fleeing from the pursuit of the limped yokai, without realizing they were running towards the Toguro battle arena. Until finally they gathered right when Toguro beat Yusuke and the others. That's when the limped yokai and then used the opportunity to tell Yusuke that they had previously killed Master Genkai, where the event was only known by Enma. And until now he is hiding the truth so as not to affect Yusuke and Kuwabara's concentration. A little story about Toguro and Master Genkai. They used to be normal human friends in general, who intend to mastering martial arts. But over time, Master Genkai also getting old, while Toguro, who did not want to being old, because from the beginning he dedicated his life as a martial arts master. He did everything possible to keep him young by becoming a yokai, or half-demon. Until finally Toguro finished off Master Genkai after she gave her power to Yusuke. But instead of being grateful, Toguro, who felt his battle was interrupted, immediately destroyed the limped yokai at that time. It is even shown here that he was able to dispel Kuwabara's spirit sword with his bare hands. This again provoked Yusuke's strength, and for the first time, he could throw a series of punches at Toguro. But it also made the Toguro, who had only used 30% of his strength from the beginning, now he rose again with 100% strength power. Where it turns out that he is an S-class yokai, a yokai above a class. And out of thousands of yokai, there are only a few who can get to this level. His strength was proven when he was easily able to knock Kuwabara out with just one flick. Even Yusuke's spirit pistol shot was thwarted by him with no effort at all. In the midst of this urgent situation, Boten then checked back about the events that made Toguro as a yokai. So there was a reason where Toguro ended up justifying all means to become the strongest. 50 years ago, Toguro's students were killed by a yokai named Karen. It made him feel he was still too weak and nurtured a sense of vengeance. That was the turning point where he originally intended to dedicate his life to becoming the strongest in order to protect his friends, but instead of doing so, because he was too strong, he became disoriented and lost interest in finding an equal opponent. At this point, he intended to use his experience to bring out Yusuke's greatest strength by eliminating those closest to him, so that Yusuke would feel what he felt. And what happened was that the same feeling, as experienced by Toguro, was also felt by Yusuke. From this incident, Enma realized that what triggered the power of Toguro and Yusuke was the deep sadness when those closest to him were eliminated. It was that Yusuke then exerted all his strength to create the spiritual energy ball given by Master Genkai, and concentrated it into his spirit gun with a very large size called Rie Gun. And after much difficulty, they finally could defeat the Toguro. Here, Yukina treats Kuwabara, while he gives the magical sword he brought to Kurama. Meanwhile, for the first time, Sakio has lost a bet. He then makes good on his promise to pull the yokai bugs back into the big hole. Long story short, after everything ended, it turned out that Yukina had never met her brother at all. Meanwhile, he, who is a typical gangly man and phlegmatic person, actually said that he was not her brother. In the point, everything done by Toguro turned out to be an act of self-blame for the events of 50 years ago. Although Enma at that time had chosen him to the right path, the path Toguro took was not the path of redemption, but the deepest hell. Along with Yusuke's success in defeating Toguro and successfully closing the big hole of the afterlife or demon's world, the series ended.